Go to Sleep was one we never thought, a track that we kind of didn't think we'd get off the ground. The few times that we played it live to people, it was just this embarrassing sort of guitar noodle thing that just didn't really work out, or it just collapsed halfway through. It was awful. But we sort of kept going and kept going. It was one of those ones that we just expected to die all the time, and then it didn't, and then it turned into this really jubilant thing, you know. And there's bits that, where Phil's playing on that. It feels sort of, he's really sort of, the way he plays really, really loose at the moment, which is great, I think it's sort of quite sexy, and it really, it's not something we, normally we play uptight, but I think at the end of Kid Amnesiac, we suddenly weren't playing uptight anymore. It was really, and it was a good thing for us, I think. And the lyrics themselves were just... I mean, I had this whole thing about the record where I really, really wanted it to write itself. Where I really didn't... As I said before, I really didn't want, like, any sort of mandate or we're trying to prove anything or whatever. It was just... Because I think that... And that was a payback from the Kid Amnesiac thing, where... I think, in a way, I was quite shocked about how... Suddenly, the way everybody interpreted it, about this big sort of left turn deliberately or whatever, whereas to me it didn't really feel like that. It was sort of logical progression, but obviously not, or something, I don't know. But so I was like, okay, I'm just not going to think about this at all from my point of view. So when I was writing the lyrics, it was sort of whatever was coming out my mouth, if I thought it was half decent, I'd make a note of it. And then Go to Sleep was like, it was literally whatever's coming out my mouth, and I just had a look at it at the end. And, to me it was nonsense all the way through, and I was like, it's okay, much of the lyrics on this record is, obviously I'll rewrite this at the end, chaps, at the moment this is just nonsense, and they're all going, really? Okay. And that was one where it was all kind of, at the time, I thought complete nonsense, and then turned into this really amazing thing that, to be honest, wasn't me, really. Didn't feel like me at all. Didn't feel like I'd done it, which is great. I mean, that's how I remember when I first started writing songs, when we first were in the band as well. That's what I remember doing, and I think you get all this baggage over the years that comes up through all the analysis and stuff, and you start, like... worrying about the consequences of what you might say in this track or that track, and it ultimately just ends up being bollocks, really. And also, I mean, I think Kid A and Amnesiac was born out of that, and it was sort of the way I was trying to write there was a way of trying to deal with that. Whereas this time it was like, blah, whatever. I'm not interested in what the consequences of this are. This is just what I do today. Got to go home at lunchtime anyway, or whatever.
The kind of level of performance that we managed to capture on tape, something that we've not really done before, and that surprises me. And it's it's a relief as well, actually, because I just don't think we've really done ourselves justice in the past in that way before. And I feel we're kind of getting closer to that now.
Yeah. I think OK Computer and Ben's had stuff on it that was good. Well, they've all had good stuff on it. But it comes down to, like, as you get older, you don't want to waste time and you don't want to be uptight, because life's too short to be sort of precious, and so you just sort of, the quickest way to do things is just to go in and do them and not think about it too much, as opposed to spend weeks in adolescence obsessionals, which is sort of what it was more like. So it's been like Tom singing, amazing. He just walks in, opens his mouth, sings, and it's like, that's it. I mean, it's incredible. Like, we're just watching, like, so it's been a great, for me, like, what summed the record up was a track called Go to Sleep, which we were rehearsing, and it's got a sort of folky first half, and then it sort of grooves out in the second half, and we had this great sort of 1960s English sort of folks, West Coast sort of thing going on, early Garfunkel at first half. It was brilliant, and then we couldn't have an outro, so then we just played it through and recorded it, like, in one take, and it sounded great, but we sort of lost the first half of the song, but we didn't get what I'm saying is, people didn't come into the studio with, like, this is how everything should sound, and if it's not going to sound like this, then I'm going to throw my toys out or just freak out or not be happy, or, you know, everyone was like very, well, if it didn't work out, that's fine. And then because everyone was relaxed about it, we created a space for something unexpected and as good and sometimes better to replace it.
That's again a very old song. That was initially born out of there's a very rough demo that we've had for about 5 years of it. And when I bought this house after OK Computer and moved in, and it was in the middle of nowhere, and set up a studio in there, and it's the first thing I did in the studio. But it had actually been written before that. It was written, me and Johnny and our partners went on this trip in a Land Rover in the Negev Desert in Israel for 3 days. And I had one of these little things called a QY70, which is sort of like a Bjork uses it, and it's a sort of it looks like a calculator, but it's sort of sequencer, programmer, composer thing. Quite cheap and sort of simple. And I wrote the initial idea for it on that, and in this desert, and then just finished it in the studio, in my very rough and ready studio, and then we had it kicking around. Didn't know what to do with it for ages, and I don't know. I think it was something about the way that again the way that Phil has changed the way he drums, that he just was like on it all the way through without any effort, and it was just banging away, and we were sort of getting out of a bit of our Neuer frustrations really as well, I think, and Cosy obviously was loving it because he got to play like Peter Hook a little bit, so there's all that really.
Well, that's not my bass line, that's Tom's bass line. I mean, I'm just copying what he did on the demo, but me and Phil are definitely having a serious 80s flashback moment of New Order live at the Oxford Apollo in 1984, and
that Hook Morris axis.
I'll be hooky to your Morris. It'd be wonderful.
We Suck Young Blood. Yeah. I mean, I think that's funny. That track to me is funny. I mean, sort of. I mean, it's sort of so vaudeville, and we had all these fantasies about when we were recording it. We had Paul Thomas Anderson came to the studio, and he brought this camera with him, which is a 1920s. It was exactly the same camera model that they shot the original Nosferatu on, which is all the original Nosferatu. It's sort of basically this camera was just a box, and you wind it. And and you have to have sort of a tempo to wind it to, and if you wind it fast or slow, you get this extraordinary movement. And we wanted to sort of shoot this really over-the-top vaudeville sort of B-movie thing with it, because that to me was totally where it was coming from, And also it's really sick and sort of like sexual in a really perverse way, and all this sort of thing. It's all very LA as far as I'm concerned. It was really, I mean, I think that was the reason we went to LA, because We Suck Young Blood was that was our take on Hollywood, really, basically. In fact, we went out to a party that night, and everyone was dressed as people from Mad Hatters, bloody Mad Hatters or something, and it just fit completely. We went to this place, and it was just, you people are so silly, and they were like that's how they dress every day, to sort of create an impression. It was brilliant. Anyway, we felt like old people. Maybe we'd missed something. I mean, that was... And we were going to do all these, big computerised tricks with that. So, we were doing it thinking, it's okay, because no one's actually going to hear this. And then we kept it, because it was so stupid.
I mean, that song... We approached it more as a light... I mean, it doesn't sound very light-hearted, but it was done in a very light-hearted spirit, really, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It does sound very much like... it started off sounding quite like a pastiche, really. Normally with that kind of when it starts off there, we discard something very, very quickly, I think, but we actually stuck with it, and it's got, you know, a very sinister feel to it, and
backing section from Phil on the drums, and then we've got the rest of us muffing it over by clapping over the top of it completely out of time. Expensive microphones and a lot of studio hours and studio tape was spent on like getting us all clapping like that as well. Yeah, there's a lot of different takes. It was, Nigel really drove us. I think it was like 3 days.
People have reported feeling unwell and and uneasy and unsure, and while listening to it, which is a good reaction to get, I think, halfway through a record. I think there's lots of uncertainty on the record lyrically, and that's one point where the music goes quite unsettling, I think.
It was one of those ones that when Tom brought the Gloaming into and we heard it on a CD that he presented with us with a load of material before we even started, but it was one of the few, you know, tracks that came from, you know, essentially a laptop, and we sort of revisited it back in our studio after we'd been in LA and after we'd done a lot of live stuff, and it was really refreshing to hear something out of you know, we'd done a lot of live stuff, and to hear something that was you know, digital and it was I remember it was a Friday night that we sort of revisited. It was the end of a session, end of a week, and it was just kind of, you know, it was another tone, it was another mood, another, you know, and it was different. It was like we've got to make this work in the record. It sort of adds it takes it to another extreme in a way.
And strangely, it was actually put together without computers. It's all done from don't want to get overly technical, but it was done with pieces of tape. It wasn't, so the rhythms you're hearing are in a way quite mechanical. So it's that's why it's so unsettling, maybe.
That was musically, that was all born out of an experiment that Johnny started, where he wanted to cut. He did it with tape loop, and he wanted to cut it as on a record, you know, as a lock groove, so that you know what a lock groove is. So you put one on, and it rather than the record going to the middle, it just stays where it is. And so he sat down with Graham Stewart, who's another engineer we work with, and basically figured it out. And I don't know what he was going to use it for really, but I heard it when he and Colin started working on it, and I just thought it was the most amazing thing that Johnny had ever written, and I just said, I'll have that, and took the hard disk away, and used to drive round down country roads during dusk, basically, or the gloaming, listening to this thing, and had this melody that was coming out underneath, and it was very much about imminent sense of darkness, and thinking about the future, and I guess, you know, it's got a lot of dread in it, really, and a lot of sort of totally out of control feelings, you know. I mean, my favourite line in the whole record is the genie let out of the bottle thing, because that's kind of really sums it up for me. At the time I was thinking a lot, it was during the Afghan War, and I was also thinking a lot about, you know, that I think, if I remember rightly, that was the rise of the right, all that stuff about the right in Europe and in France, and was it Belgium? I'm not sure, I can't remember now. And that sort of general sense of ignorance and intolerance and panic and stupidity, and everybody running for cover, which is also, I guess, in my description of Backdrifts as well.